Welcome. This is Viewing at Dombo Lodge, written and narrated by Yaba Arma. The early funeral guests dotted the church pews, black flies wearing surgical masks.
They should be wearing black and red,
said a middle-aged auntie. She stroked the crimson scarf around her neck. A lady one bench over sniffed. She did not know the auntie with the red scarf, had never met her. So she spoke to the wind and hoped it carried.
Well, the family specifically requested black. Or white. When children die, we wear white,
said another, ignoring the wind whisperer.
No,
said the crimson-scarfed woman.
Everyone knows. When the deceased child is above 18, we wear black and red.
A soft but steady hum billowed into the cavernous chamber. A grey-wigged madame, 2 pews down, turned this way and that in search of the source. In between the whistling notes of the wind, someone was crying with perfect pitch.
Oh, it's so sad,
she said, not sounding sad at all. It had been 2 unbearable weeks stuck indoors. Beside her, her husband, double masked, snorted.
This had better be a closed viewing.
Of course. She pulled down her mask to freely talk.
It has to be, given the circumstances.
Her husband yanked her mask back up. There was a sudden and sharp exhale, and the 2 of them whipped around, the man in defense, while the woman buzzed with excitement. Directly behind them, a young woman sat bent over, her face hidden in her lap.
Oh, poor thing. Don't cry. Death is not the end,
cooed the elderly woman. She reached over the pew to pat the young lady's shoulder, but her husband caught the wandering limb.
6 feet apart. So we can't console her, not with your hands,
he said. But Kwabia was not crying. She was frantically trying to reduce the volume of her phone. She jabbed incessantly at the mute button as the machine, possessed, insisted on doing the opposite. A week ago, she had said yes to a software update, and now the ghost of the previous operating system was haunting her. Sometimes it would open a dozen different apps all at once, and other times, like today, it would start to play videos loudly. 2 naked brown blobs writhed on the phone screen. One of the blobs groaned. The other gasped. Kwabia whacked the machine against the wooden bench, and before it could recover from the shock, she jammed her thumb down on the power button. The phone whirred. She would choke the thing. She would choke it until it literally blacked out. A minute later, breathing raggedly, she let go, her thumb throbbing. It had been a bad idea then when Nee suggested they make a special film just for the 2 of them. And it was a bad idea now.
That's right. Be strong, sweetheart,
said the old lady, mistaking Kwabia's breathing for the after-tremors of a good cry suppressed. The church organ began to play. A massive portrait of Ni Akotosoa, Kwabia's ex-boyfriend, descended from the ceiling above the pulpit. Be strong, repeated the old lady as the portrait floated down. This has been a sample of the audio fiction Viewing at Dombo Lodge, written and narrated by Yaba Arma. Viewing at Dombo Lodge is a dark comedy set in 2020 Accra, Ghana. In the throes of the coronavirus pandemic, Accra is technically under lockdown. Then a young man with the right name passes away. The death of Ni Akoto Sowa, the direct heir to the vast Duncan fortune, merits not only a full-scale funeral in the middle of a global pandemic, but the attendance of the president himself. As well-wishers pile into the grand church, the reader gets a first-hand view of how influential power is and how simply being in the right room can make all the difference. This story began as a critique of Ghana's response to the global pandemic of 2019. In Ghana, corruption can be a complex web of want, need, and human fragility that connects everyone, from the ministers to the street sweepers. We live with it, we are part of it. And until 2019, it was easier to turn a blind eye to it. Then the pandemic arrived. And very quickly, the cracks in our public systems began to show. Those who needed help, the majority of Ghanaians, had little to no access to it. And those who could afford the very best of healthcare were being offered masks for free. In writing this story, I wanted to capture an accurate snapshot of this sad and depressing phenomenon. But as I wrote, opportunities for laughter and hope kept cropping up. And that's the thing about corruption in a society. It doesn't only involve bad people. It involves all people, which means that in the throes of the worst situation, there's still room for kindness and grace and bravery. So while Viewing at Dombo Lodge began as a critique, I like to believe it ends on a brighter note. It is a hat tip to humanity, and it is a light to the underrated potential of sharing information in the battle against corruption and the unfair distribution of power. My name is Yaba Arma. I am a Ghanaian writer, and I trade stories for a change in mindset.